Hi everyone and welcome to Brick Arena. And in this video I'm finally going to cover the topic of transitioning from being a hobby seller to selling Lego full time and making my living entirely from selling Lego. So I'm going to try and break this down into a logical flow. So I want to cover my background, why I transitioned, and give you some insight into how it's gone for me, and also give you some pros and cons of selling Lego full time. So I'm going to be as open and transparent as I can be, but at the same time, I'm not really going to be sharing any hard numbers. But bear with me, and hopefully you'll get some good insight into how things are going. So first thing to mention is the background to why I've even got started in Bricklink at all. And I started in the Lego hobby in 2015, not very long ago at all, really. Got started quite late in life and really only set up the Bricklink store as a way of making some extra income to fund my Lego addiction. I was buying tons of Lego sets from all kinds of themes and spending an absolute fortune month on month, and needed to find a way to be able to maintain that. And I quickly learned that selling Lego itself was a way of funding that. And the first thing I did was one day saw a cheap deal in Tesco on some Series 14 minifigures. Bought, I think, 5 boxes of them, and started selling them on eBay, and that was the start of everything. So selling as a hobby was good, but it took a lot of time. You'd have your day job, as I'm sure many of you do already, working 8 or more hours a day, then coming home, having to face picking and packing orders for that day, and getting them out in the post the next day, while again still working. Now, I very quickly learned that I wanted to sell on multiple platforms, so I wasn't only focused on Bricklink. In fact, I actually started selling on eBay, then moved on to Bricklink, and then quite quickly after moving on to Bricklink, also moved on to Brickowl. Now, running the store as I did actually became one of the more enjoyable parts of the Lego hobby for me, and I quite enjoyed, looking for deals, looking for things to sell, and I enjoyed the whole process of parting out, storing the inventory, and selling it to customers. And so I kind of began to look at that as a plan for early retirement for me. Now, I'm in my late 50s, and I didn't want to be working till I was 65. And so I started to think about how early could I start and retire. And when I did, then I could use the funds from selling Lego part time, thinking at that time, to supplement my pension, as it were. And that was a great plan. The only thing was that was triggered considerably early by being made redundant last year. So it was literally right at the start of COVID. Um, um, I learned I was going to be made redundant. I actually left in about the June of 2020, and immediately thought, what am I going to do? And for a few days, maybe even a week or two, I thought about, do I need to now go and get a proper job? But to be honest with you, having come from a corporate world and coming from a sort of senior management position, I didn't really have the appetite to go and look for or work in another corporate environment. And really, what I wanted to do was just really make a go of selling Lego full time. So I decided that I would give that ago. And there was, one of the things that really enabled me to do that, to be quite honest, was the fact that whilst being made redundant, I got a very healthy redundancy payment, which meant that I could afford to live for a year or two on the redundancy alone without making any other money. So that gave me a very high level of comfort to say, I could play at selling Lego for a little while and see how it goes. Without really worrying too much. It wasn't like I had to make the mortgage payments next month and I had to do that off my own steam. That wasn't and still isn't the case for me a year down the line. So it is important though to think, if you were going to make the transition yourself, how would you supplement your salary, because you're not going to go, at least I don't think you're going to be lucky to go from your salary to making that equal amount selling Lego. And of course that all depends on the amount of money you're making. I had a really good salary, to be quite honest with you. So to make that amount, or to replace that significant salary I had in selling Lego, I just don't think was possible. Even now, I don't think is possible. So you have to readjust and think about what is it you really need, and everybody's going to be different. I was the only wage earner in my household. You might have two incomes. You might have children to support. You might have kids going off to university before too long. All of these things are expensive and take significant funds. So you need to think about that. Think about your pension and things like that. So those are all things that I'll come on to that do have an impact with things. So how did I transition? So I had been operating out of my spare bedroom upstairs in my house. It wasn't a massive bedroom, and certainly wasn't going to allow me to have the scale of store that I would need to generate enough of an income. So it was very clear to me that was one of the things that was going to have to change. Now, as it happened, you'll have seen on my channel maybe that I'm now sat in a fairly sizable room. It's unfortunately it's very long, about 30 something feet by about 12 or 14 feet. So it's very long and relatively narrow. Ideally, it would be a much sort of squarer setup, much like you see the basements in our US friends in a lot of their houses. But it is what it is, and I'm very lucky to have a room of this size that I could move into. So that's what I've done. I've relocated from the bedroom that I had upstairs into the room that I'm in now. I had to think about space, so I had to give up the Lego city that I had, that I was building as part of a hobby, and I did kind of make a smaller city. So I kind of reversed the rooms. So I did move some things upstairs into the bedroom, a smaller city, some shelving units for display and other things. Although to be honest, it's mostly storage of sealed sets right now. But you had to think about what was the scope of the space that you're going to have to sell from. Now, the other major thing I had to think about was, I'd been buying Lego as a hobby. And that was the big one for me, because I was spending a fortune and buying Lego sets for myself that I was never ever getting around to build. So the big decision that I had to make was to give up Lego. And that sounds crazy when this is exactly why you got into it. But I gave up Lego as a hobby, as a personal enjoyment, as it were. I don't buy Lego sets for myself anymore. And in fact, all of the sealed sets that I had built up over the many months and years of being in the hobby, um, all went up for sale. And I started to sell them mostly through eBay. I decided not to sell at least the bigger sets. I didn't sell in my store. I didn't really want the hassle of sending off very sizable sets to the US or to Europe, wherever. And I couldn't see an easy way in Bricklink to sell specific items only within a certain region. So I decided to stick to eBay for those, but effectively I gave up everything. Now I've still got lots of sets still around me and still sealed, and all of the things that I built, so all of the modulars are sat above me right now on a shelf, and I've got some other things. But to be honest, I'm very seriously thinking about getting rid of even those, because all they're doing is gathering dust and kind of restricting how I can set up and run the store. So giving up Lego was the big thing for me. But again, I was really lucky because I had that very sizable collection that I could monetize. I could sell that and start to bring in more money. So not just through the parts sales, but through those sale of those sets. And that was quite significant. So think about that as you know want to transition. What are you going to do about continuing the Lego hobby yourself, and what are you going to do with your collection? So the next thing to think about, I think, is working practice. And I think it's very, you have to get out of the hobby mindset, I think, because it's very easy to sit and think about, or I come home from work on an evening and I need something to do, and so I'll go and tinker in my little Bricklink workshop for an hour or two. I might part the odd set out, or I might put some things away, or I might pick an order. But you really have to change that mindset when that's how you're making a living. You've got to be very disciplined about it. It's certainly not easy ride, and you can't be very casual about it. So for me, I get up quite early in the morning, around 7, and then I'm straight at it, and I'm working all day long on the store in various ways. I think it's important to vary what you're doing a little bit. Sometimes I'm parting out, sometimes I'm putting stuff away. Some days you're just picking orders, other days you're sorting minifigures out. You need to rotate those things to keep it a little bit interesting for you, but it's important to have discipline and make sure that you're putting in the time and effort to actually generate you some funds. So I'm working a full working week, Monday to Friday now. Initially, I was working Monday to Saturday, but I decided to stop working at all on Saturdays, so that I had that kind of real work, that kind of real working structure, as it were, Monday to Friday, and then 2 days off. Um, and that gives me some time with the family, etc. But what I do find is it's very difficult to cut off in the evenings. So I'm sat in this room, surrounded by Lego, surrounded by my work, as it were. Even in the evenings when I want to relax, I want to use my computer for other things, maybe. And it's very difficult to detach. So you end up working quite long hours, and that's fine if you enjoy it. That's absolutely fine. And some days I'll just come in, I'll have something on the computer, and I might be sorting something else. But it means, if you think about it, you're putting in a lot more than a normal working week in terms of hours, and you just need to think about that. Now, the other thing I had to think about was accounting and how I dealt with that. Because it was all hobby before, I hadn't really looked too closely at the accounting side and keeping stats. I simply bought things. As long as I had more coming in than I had kind of going out, I was fine. But because of the complexity of my year, as it were, with working part of the year, having a big redundancy payout, setting up a new company, and everything else that went along with that. I decided that I would sign up with an accountant and have them do my tax return. And I did get some other advice, which I may be able to touch on in a little while. But uh, I can't tell you how much getting the accountant really paid off, because he was just being so helpful in helping me understand how to set things up. And at the end of the year, when I did my tax return, it was really well worth the money I'd spent. Now, I also had to think about improving my record keeping, tracking my costs, tracking my sales, and I had to get much better at that. I'm now trying QuickBooks, do all my accounting in QuickBooks online. So think about how you'll do that. And you'll get away with a spreadsheet, maybe, and it really depends on how complicated your finances are, etc. But it's something to think about. Another thing I did was I set up a business account with Royal Mail, so that all my mail is done through an online business account, and I pay for all my mail once a month. I take it to a local depot in post sacks, and yeah, that saves me a little bit of money. And to be honest, I'm still, there are pros and cons to using that, but that's one thing that I decided to do in the transition. So I guess the main thing is you're all thinking about is how have I done? Well, as I said, I've not been, I've not been keeping records for many years, but I could see a significant growth in my sales, but that was really down to several things. One, all of the sealed sets I was selling. Another one was the amount of investment into the store, really scaling the store up in size, more than double the orders I was getting. And it was already a busy year with COVID kicking in. Lots of you will have seen spikes, but I went in the August when I first started selling sort of full time. I was doing something like 176 orders a month, and by November I was doing about 350, something like that. So it scaled and grew from there. Um, but you have to keep in mind that while sales might be growing, and my sales were a very my sales for the year were just around that sort of 40% cut off mark, so 40 plus K. But you have to keep in mind that that's sales, it's not profit. That tells you nothing about how much I invested into that in terms of buying stock, in terms of post. If I tell you, for instance, my post bill was around £700 a month, that gives you some kind of idea. So some months, I'd be spending thousands on stock. You have to keep the stock growing. Of course, you want the size of the store to scale. So that was difficult as well. But what I will say is that no single month's profits came even close to the salary that I was earning before. Now, it didn't really matter to me in a way because of the redundancy money that I have behind me, etc. But for me personally, and I do, understand that my salary was very healthy, but as I said, no single month really covered that take home pay. That profit didn't equal the take home pay I was earning before. And also keep in mind that I wasn't paying national insurance contributions. I wasn't paying pension contributions. I wasn't getting a contribution from my employer. So those are all things to keep in mind. So, what are the real pros and cons of running a Lego business yourself? Well, number one's being your own boss, getting up every day, deciding what you're going to do. That's great. At the same time, you need to be driven. You haven't got a boss telling you what to do, so you really need to be structured. You need to have a plan of attack, and you need to stick to it. So the other thing is you can work on your own schedule. You know, you don't have to work 9 till 5. You can switch those hours around to suit you, and you can be flexible, take a couple of hours off in the middle of the day and make them up later. That's fine. You're the master of your own destiny, which is the best part about the job. Well, the negative, I would say, is possibly the repetition. You're constantly parting out, putting away, picking, posting, and the days don't often have that much variation, especially in the busy periods where you're getting lots of orders in, and particularly Mondays. You might spend the entire day on a Monday picking orders and packing them ready for the post. The other issue for me, changing from being largely sat down all day to now being on my feet constantly, gave me some minor health issues with sort of shoulder pain, back pain, things like that. Think about that. For me, a con was losing my personal space, so I've given up my nice study, etc. This is all a very sort of industrial looking work area now, and I suppose you can think that you have to set some challenges as well. There you don't have the challenge of when you're working for another company. You have deadlines to make, etc. So you need to make your own goals and targets. So was this worth it for me to make the transition? Absolutely. No doubt about it for me. It suits me. It's changed my working lifestyle. It's changed how, changed my stress levels incredibly, to be quite honest with you. I was massively under stress at times when I was working. Now I don't have a bit of stress in my life at all. But yeah, again, I was very lucky with the collection that I had that I could resell, and B, the large pot of money, if you like, at the start that allowed me to not worry about the money coming in for a while. Now I'm likely going to. I haven't drawn any pensions yet, but I'm likely to do that in the next year or two. So at that time, I might rethink this again. Will I scale this down again a little bit? Will I give it up entirely? I don't know. Everybody's circumstances are so different. You really need to evaluate if it's worth it for you, if it's something you can do, if it's something you can do long time. I'm not sure I would want to be 35 and starting to do this, giving up a career and thinking I've got to do this for another 30 years. I just don't know where we would be with that. But for me, and the time scale that I need this to work for me, then I think it's absolutely fine, and it'll be a nice supplement to my pension. Would it in time replace entirely the salary I was getting before? Personally, I very much doubt it. At least in the space I've got now, I think I'd have to move into having a commercial space, something much bigger, growing the stock much more, etc. But if it's a modest salary that you're trying to replace, then I guess it's doable. The only question for me is, and I'm very aware of this when I'm doing these kind of videos, is the more people getting involved in Bricklink, Brickowl, etc., is going to dilute everybody's revenue. So it is a diminishing return. I think if you know, everybody wants to get in, everybody wants to start growing their stores to hundreds of thousands of parts, and if everybody's trying to do that, then you know, I imagine there's only so many buyers out there to take from from the pool of sellers that there are. But there you go. So anyway, I'm sorry I'm not able to give you more firm numbers, etc. I hope you understand why that's not possible for me. But you know, I hope it's been useful. I hope you've been able to take something away from it. And if you enjoyed it, then by all means, give me a thumbs up. And remember to subscribe to the channel. And I'll speak to you all on the next video. Bye for now.